Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, campus minister at the University of Toledo.
Maybe when we look at the scene and it appears as though they have so much physical freedom today. Young people seem to be able to stay out later than they used to, and they get cars at an early age, and when they're on the campuses they have a lot of alternatives, possibilities, great amount of freedom, and so on. And so I guess we tend to think of them as a pampered group in many ways, as having more alternatives than most people do in the world.
Joining Father Bacik in today's Reflections is Sister Joyce Lehman, Director of Religious Education at St. Thomas More University Parish in Bowling Green. Today's Reflections focuses on the topic of youth ministry and cultural images. Here's Father Bacik.
Joyce, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and coming to speak with me on this program. I thought we would talk a little bit about youth ministry and a particular aspect of it, the more social and cultural side of it. You've spent a lot of your time in the ministry dealing with young people, and perhaps it would be good for us to discuss that a bit. Are you game for that?
I think so. This is an area I have some strong feelings about, and probably some personal opinions about what needs to be done and how we might help our youth deal with some of the things that they're facing in the culture today.
Well, good. Let it fly then.
Okay.
Don't hold back, okay?
Moderation in all things, of course.
You are such a gentle soul, Joyce. I can't imagine you coming on so strong like that. But when it gets to cultural criticism, at times we do need to perhaps sound a little more radical and so on. Start out with a statement that I read in a book by Michael Warren entitled Youth and the Future of the Church, in which he made the claim that young people are among the most oppressed people in our society because they are voiceless and powerless and do not understand the manipulation that is imposed on them. Now, at first blush, that sounds like a really ridiculous statement. If we're looking for oppressed people, we might think of people who are living in ghettos and think of the unemployed, and we think of the third world countries and so on, and I think there we often find real oppression, and we think of political prisoners and so on, and that's such a frightening kind of thing. And so his statement that youth in the United States are oppressed sounds strange at first blush, that's for sure. I suppose it's meant to be one of those statements that sort of boggles our mind or forces us to think in new patterns, but maybe we might explore that and to see what kind of a point he might have.
I think he followed up well with something that struck me in the sense that they are voiceless. And I would say they're voiceless because, and they are oppressed because they really don't know what's happening to them. They don't have an alternative way of seeing things. They're surrounded almost by a media blitz as to what they're expected to be and to do and how they're to act and how they're to dress, what they're to expect of the future. And in that way, I think with nothing else to play off of for themselves, they become oppressed, they become manipulated, they become ignorant of anything else. And I think that's a true lack of freedom.
Maybe when we look at the scene and it appears as though they have so much physical freedom today. Young people seem to be able to stay out later than they used to, and they get cars at an early age, and when they're on the campuses they have a lot of alternatives, possibilities, great amount of freedom, and so on. And so I guess we tend to think of them as a pampered group in many ways, as having more alternatives than most people do in the world. And I'm speaking about the privilege now and the fairly well-to-do, the middle class. When we start thinking about black teenage youth, where we've got an unemployment rate over 40% or something like that in our big cities, then you have a whole different kind of problem. They don't have alternatives in any real physical, material kind of way. They're imprisoned in that ghetto and don't seem to have any way to break out. So maybe one of the things we're talking about is more of a psychological, emotional oppression, as you pointed out, where young people sort of don't know what's going on with them. Maybe we could begin to see that in greater detail here of how that might happen. I guess the world of advertising has a lot to do with that. Michael Warren, in the book I was talking about before, presents this scene to a class of his to analyze, and it's about a young girl. I think she's 16 years old, and she's been reading the magazine 17, I guess, which is a popular one for people that age, and she's seen the clothes in there and so on, and she's just left school where she really has been unfairly treated by a teacher. I mean, actually has been, and it really wasn't her fault. And she's gazing in this window then of this store, and there's this dress for $175 in there, and as she looks at it, it brings back those images out of the 17 magazine, and she suddenly finds herself in this great depression because she wants that dress and she can't have it, and she thinks she ought to be able to have it, and she's thinking about the unfairness of her life because this English teacher treated her badly and unfairly and so on. And then he asks the young people to sort of analyze this situation as to what's going on. And I guess he finds that most people attack it psychologically. They want to know more about what's going on in their own mind and head and so on, whereas he wants it to be a sociological analysis. He wants them to be able to see that this young woman is being manipulated in a way that she doesn't even recognize. So that 17 magazine is presenting her with a picture of what the good life is all about, of what it means to be with it in society. And it means wearing, evidently, these certain clothes and living a certain lifestyle. And now she can't afford that. And therefore, the culture creates her bind. She's now depressed because she can't have this kind of thing. And she doesn't even know why she's depressed. And she doesn't even know what's going on with her. So I guess part of what we would say is that the culture has great power to manipulate all of us. I don't think, maybe we're going to go on with its analysis. We have to see how we can be imprisoned in the societal images, all of us. I mean, we seldom see through it. We got pictures of what it means to be the macho male or the beautiful woman in our society, and we're constantly bombarded with those kinds of things, and maybe we can't get distance to step back from it. And how do we expect the young people to do it, I guess?
I think most of us who are a little bit older have some sense of that developing over a period of time, of seeing maybe even, in my case, an alternative from my youth and young adult years, that the media blitz especially, and I don't want to be simplistic about it, but the idea that if you possess certain things, the good life follows. And I like I said, I don't want to be simplistic, but I think that's a really strong influence on young people.
Are you suggesting that is something new, that they're bombarded in a way that maybe previous generations were not?
Well, I think we've always been bombarded. The back 1908 Sears and Roebuck catalog presented us with all the good things that we might possibly have. There may have been more realism about not being able to have those on a greater scale within America. Many people now have more money, and what we would have considered luxury items before now become near necessities in many people's lives and in their homes. So maybe we do have a sense of being able to, if we want to, step back. I think youth, to a great extent, have never experienced the not having. They have had many things. And again, we're speaking, I think, of upper and middle class families. Those on a more of a poverty income will experience something different, but they experience a desire because there's no way, even in poverty, to escape the materialism that's presented to us. And
in other words, many of those people do have television sets, and they're bombarded with those kinds of images.
Or walking by store windows, or billboards. It's radios. You don't even have to have the visual approach. It's there in the words that people speak, and what they say is good for us.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe we brought up the visual imagery there that is much more available today because of television, and these people really have refined the business of creating appealing images. That's what they're all about. That's what the advertising industry works on, and and let's face it, they are good at it, and they come up
Yes.
with images that do stick in people's minds and perhaps enhance or intensify this desire to have more things.
I think they match unrelated types of things. They sell a material product with sex or sexual success. They sell it with power, that if you possess a particular thing, you'll have power over the elements, power over your own mobility, power over other people. So that they're putting to a deep psychological need, something we search for. We need to establish ourselves as an individual. We want to control our environment. We want to control ourselves, and in some instances have control over others. And they play off of those needs to sell. And so we buy something thinking the other thing's going to follow, and that need that we have to be liked or to be in control is going to be answered by the possession of a thing.
It's interesting how we can get drawn into that world without being able to critique it. I think last weekend I was with a Jesuit priest from Oxford, England, who I had known when I was over there, and we were together for the whole weekend. And a number of times this kind of thing came up where there were gadgets or luxury items we had that we have just learned to take for granted. Simple thing like he wanted some lemonade or something, and I reached in the refrigerator and got some ice cubes, and put it in a glass and poured it. And he says, "Boy," he says, "I'll bet you really missed that when you were in England, not having ice." You know, and we take just simple thing like that. I mean, the average home didn't have a refrigerator like that, or in the setting that I was in, we didn't have ice available to us. And something that we would take so much for granted today, and yet he saw it. And but it really caught me up short when he said that, because my response to him was, yeah, we are so spoiled in many ways. We have so many things. We get used to all of that, and we begin to expect it and to think we have it coming. And I guess we have rising expectations then. So I guess in the culture as a whole, if this is going on and we can't critique it or it's hard to see it, then maybe young people are especially prone to that, and it becomes difficult for them to zero in on this problem.
It's hard to critique when you've never had another way to live.
Yes.
Growing up, and I use the phrase reservedly, in the lap of luxury makes it difficult to critique, I think.
Yes. It's probably true. I think another area that this Michael Warren talks about is in the sexual area. And he talks about the popular songs. In a way, he's very hard on the popular songs, and he suggests that we really can't get rid of them in any way. The songs are around, and there's no sense in trying to think we're going to just ban them all from the radio or something. But what he thinks is important is that we would raise people's consciousness. And he talks about young women who are really into these songs, and that there's a subliminal message that's portrayed that is really a sexist kind of thing and very sexually titillating in many ways. He gives the words of a song that Mick Jagger sings. It's called "Under My Thumb," and I'm just going to read some. It says, "Under my thumbs, the girl who once had me down. Under my thumbs, the girl who once pushed me around. It's down to me. The difference in the clothes she wears, it's down to me. The change has come. She's under my thumb. Under my thumb's a squirming dog who's just had her day. Under my thumb's a girl who had just changed her ways. It's down to me. The way she does just what she's told, it's down to me. The change has come. She's under my thumb." A popular song, evidently. And his question to the young people, what does it do to you to listen to songs like that all the time? And one of the responses he gives is, well, we don't listen to the words anyway. We don't pay any attention to the words. And I guess one of his senses is that, well, but the message is coming across just continually. And what a blatantly sexist statement that song is. It really is. I was shocked when I read the words to that, because I never hear the words. I don't hear their music that much. I guess we should pay more attention to that, and that's a great entree into their lives, I suppose. And a lot of good youth ministers I know do that. I think we have a radio program around these days, don't we?
Yes,
like that?
Yes, we do.
Do you remember the details of it and so on?
I know it involves a discussion of popular music. In other words, what is being
by
said
priests
and what
of
it
the
means.
Diocese
Right.
of Toledo,
Right.
Tom
Priests.
Odie.
Right, and some of the young adults also in the diocese.
And Marty Nasser
Right.
is the one who really knows a lot about all of
Yes.
that. But I mean, it reminds me that this is really needed, and that kind of critique. Well, that's amazing, isn't it? That a young girl would like that kind of song.
And it's presented in an appealing kind of way. It's presented with a rhythm that's catchy, with a tune that repeats until the point it becomes. The parallel in a spiritual life would become like a mantra.
Mm-hmm.
The words simply come over and over and over, asking, like my nephews when they're humming a song or starting to sing it, like, what are you singing? And then they'll stop and think about it. And if they think about it, they know all the words. But they normally don't think about it. It's just an automatic kind of thing for them.
But they did know the words.
They did know the words.
Uh-huh.
It's all there.
Uh-huh.
It's a very subliminal kind of thing, and I think listening to it, I think if I remember recently reading, a popular radio station that does like the top 40 repeats certain songs, like they'll have maybe 20 songs that are repeated during the day. And after you've heard this for the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th time, it does become a part of you. It is repeated over and over.
So we really have a dangerous thing here, in other words, that the morals of youth really could be subverted. I mean, it sounds like scare tactics to talk that way and an overreaction, but something really is going on here and that we have to be alert to. I really don't think it's natural. And I don't know if I really understand this, but the very young age that the kids become interested in the opposite sex and talk about dating and interacting and go into these terrible... I mean, we see that in the grade schools, and I mean, at an age when I really don't believe it's normal and natural. I mean, I have to think that that's manufactured by the culture. And I mean, I guess all the observers of the youth scene keep saying these things happen at a younger and younger age, and parents get more and more pressure to try to leave the youngsters be youngsters for a while. I mean, they're getting the pressure to allow the kids to do this all the time, and so what they're trying to do is to allow the youngsters to remain in that more innocent state, if you want to say, for a while, or enjoy the normal things that I think kids really like. It's got to be manufactured. I mean, I just don't believe it.
Yeah, I think there's a real manipulation. I think what's happened is we've set the stage by giving the younger children words for things that they've only touched on in their experience. And again, I think a lot of the blame lies with adults who affirm that kind of action or that kind of language in them, and children need to be accepted. They need to be affirmed, and they will repeat the action that evokes the affirmation. So when they run around the house and do the dancing and they sing the songs, and someone gives them a commendation for that, or says, isn't that cute, and laughs, it simply leads to more and more of that. The big man talk of the little 5th grader out on the playground, adults laugh at that, and therefore they provoke it to be continued.
Mm-hmm. And surely the media have a lot to do with moving the young people in this direction. The songs, the television, the radio programs, and so on.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that we need to do then for youth is to help raise their consciousness about all of this, to help them to see things more clearly in the way they are programmed by cultural images. One thing comes to my mind. One of the professors teaching a course on women's studies, I think, used to ask the young women this question, like, if you have made an engagement with another woman, you have a date to go out and for lunch or something, or for dinner, and an invitation comes from a man, how many of you would just automatically break that and say yes to the guy to go out with him? And it's almost, I guess, a very common response is, of course we would. And she raised the question and said, well, does that make sense? What does that say about the culture, about the freedom and independence of women, about women respecting other women, and so on, and having a life that has a inherent meaning of its own, instead of thinking that one's whole happiness and so on depends on a man in one's life? I find that to be an interesting kind of consciousness-raising question. I notice very often when I talk to young women in the cult about the sexual problems and whether they really feel free to say no to men sexually, the word will come out easily, yes, we do, of course we are free to say no, But much of my counseling reveals to me that they're not free to say no. They feel pressured that if they don't agree to have full sexual expression with this young man, they're just not going to see him again. And if they keep adopting that stance, they're going to be sitting home all the time. And that there becomes a tremendous pressure to give in sexually in this regard. So that my sense again is that there really are cultural images here, and that are hard to overcome, and that even the young people don't want to admit it. They won't agree that they're programmed in this way. And I've zeroed in on the women's side of it, but I'm sure you have it on the other side with the males of being macho and strong and not crying and afraid to show emotion. Now, why is it we get so many men in the culture that can't express emotion, can't articulate what they're feeling, are not in touch with their feelings, can't tell their wives their deepest feelings, and so on? It's not accidental. I think it's because a culture is programming men to be more reserved in that regard, and therefore creating a lot of problems for us, keeping us men out of touch with our feminine side, or the anima, as Carl Jung calls it, within us, and out of touch with emotions that we ought to know and be able to express and to critique.
Again, I think television is a clue in that. You know, the type of people who are presented, who succeeds, who fails. I think the soaps do a real good presentation on that, of presenting, you're following people's lives, and you begin to sense how they make their decisions, what values they hold, but not in a conscious kind of way, but you simply take it for granted in this hour segment that you follow through 5 days out of the week, and you wait eagerly. I find this with the college students. You know, they have their favorite soaps, where they will actually arrange their class schedules around so that they can be in front of the TV set to watch that soap. But it's an unquestioning kind of thing, and it's an interesting thing to pull back after you've watched a movie with them, or watched a television program, to pull back and say, okay, now what has happened here? What's going on? You know, do you really agree with that? And it's interesting, when they sit back, on one level they say, well, certain things, no, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with wasting someone or killing someone in order to promote a cause, but they accept it because that's a part of the whole movement within that. And again, in acting that out, sometimes what we say we believe and in what we value in terms of action are at odds with each other. And I think they discover that, and that's part of their confusion in their lives.
You know, I suggest something that parents could probably do along this line to help the young people. That is, watch television programs with them and then talk about them afterwards, and be able to point out what values are at stake there, or just to get the young people to think critically about what they have been seeing. I've talked to parents who do that, who will consciously sit down and watch, and then just casually, informally engage their offspring in conversation on the matter, and be ready with the probing question like, well, why did that character really do that? Or do you really agree with that way of acting, and so on? And maybe for the first time, then young people would start to think critically.
Yes, presuming the parents have already begun the process for themselves.
That's right, they would have to do it. And it's always back to the same thing, isn't it? In youth ministry, we have to attend to ourselves. It's always what's going on with us adults that really counts. What sort of a community are we creating? We can't expect young people to arise above the level that we ourselves have achieved. Joyce, I wonder if we can think of other ways that we would try to help raise consciousness on these kinds of questions.
I think the reflection is an important thing, and it's something that we don't expect or allow time for with our youth too, is calling them back in a sense of really reflecting on their own lives, what they value in their daily living out, and then what's being presented to them. It's very much the consciousness raising thing, but it steps back and says, what do I really value? What do I really want in my life? Mm-hmm. And then once that's been in touch with, to look at what's then being presented to them as being of value.
I wonder if we could have courses taught as well on how to watch television effectively. Or I know some of these good courses that teachers use the modern music as the lead-in in the course to get at religious kinds of questions and the deeper issues that are at stake. That would seem like another way of going about it.
Yes, and our youth really are interested in that. They really want to know. Living out their daily lives is where they're at, and it's where they want, in a sense, answers. They want to know another way of doing it to match it up with what's happening. I think sharing our tradition in that way, sharing our moral stance, the Christian values, is important for adults in dealing with youth, because they want to hear that. They really want to know how people find it best to live out their lives.
I think that one of the important things would be to have alternative lifestyles in front of them, therefore, that where they could see adults who live a simpler life, who aren't hung up on material things. They could see adults who like to talk about serious matters. It seems to me that would be one of the good things about religious orders, for example. They represent an alternative lifestyle where there's a whole different value system that's supposed to be at work. And I suppose that will only work to the degree that those people in these religious orders do it well and are faithful to their vows or faithful to the principles or ideals of their order that they belong to. But it seems to me culturally that's a really valuable thing that religious orders do for people.
I would be in agreement with that. I would hope, though, that more and more people, as we are faced with the world situation today, would find the value of the simple life and living
the
that out
simple
too.
life, that we need some ways to show that consumerism isn't the final answer to all of this.
And letting other cultures speak to us is another way.
That's right. Travel. Oh, so many ways. But what we've been talking about, Joyce, is young people, youth ministry, and the problems of societal images, the cultural images that come across, and the way the young people sort of don't see that and don't want to see it. And it's almost like we have to really go at it strongly. I mean, we need a radical kind of statement here that often they are programmed. There's ways in which they are manipulated and they don't know it. And if we do see it as adults, we're going to have to help them to see that. The way they're told that having things is the only way to achieve happiness. The way they are told about sexual mores and the way that ought to be lived. We have to challenge them and I think show them effective and happy alternative lifestyles.
You've been listening to Reflections with your host, theologian Father James Bacik, campus minister at the University of Toledo. Joining Father Bacik in this discussion was Sister Joyce Lehman, Director of Religious Education at St. Thomas More University Parish in Bowling Green. The topic of this week's Reflections was youth ministry and cultural images. If you have any questions about today's program or any ideas for topics you'd like to hear discussed, please write to Reflections in care of WLQR, Toledo, Ohio 43623. Produced in the studios of WLQR, Reflections is directed by Mary Beth Kirchner.